What's cracking, people of the internet? My name is Premium Chad, aka that one kid playing Heyo Pineapple in his old Katrina list, and welcome to the Team Galaxy Brain channel. So unless you've been living under a rock, you know exactly what this video is all about. Overdress is here and it's brought a lot of changes to the game, to the point where I don't even think it's safe to call this the same game anymore. Sure, the game has the same name, but the very foundation of it has been shaken and in the best way possible. You'll remember that a while ago, I made a video on why I thought Vanguard was flawed. The very game's structure was starting to expose itself as being a completely unworkable mess, and somehow Bushiroad actually managed to solve every single issue I had not involving card design. I say that because we actually haven't seen any of the cards yet, but I digress. We saw the new mechanic literally just this morning, so we kind of know what to expect, but not really. There's still a ton of new information that other YouTubers have already discussed, so this video won't be recapping that information for you. Rather, I'll be exploring some of the implications that these changes bring. In this video, I'll be explaining in depth why all of these decisions are for the best, and how they should have been in the game from day one. So grab your bowls of specific store brand popcorn, because we're going in deep. So, of course, the biggest and honestly most surprising change was the change to how clans work. 24 unmixable attributes brought down to a clean and lovely sounding 5. No, I am not counting this dolphin. Bushiroad has already said the first booster set will not contain them, so I don't think it counts. Which, let's be real, 5 is quite the change compared to the 24 we had before that I don't think any of us expected Bushiroad to take. Now, why is this better than clan structure? One might argue that shoving all these varied and unique clans into one nation ruins the point of the game and murders clan identity. First of all, side note, real quick, if we were playing MTG the way that Richard Garfield intended it, then Vintage would be the only way to play the game, and nobody wants that. Second, clan identity was a flawed game mechanic to begin with. Like I said it in my previous video, it makes certain clans unable to get support for multiple months at a time, and it forced Bushiroad to make a new product every month. It stifled deck building creativity by forcing all of the cards into these little camps that they couldn't go outside of. But now all these issues are solved. Sets are going to be a little farther apart thanks to the new nation structure, and the deck building has been solved, but, well, you know, I'll get to that later. However, these people do have one fantastic point. What happens to all the clans and playstyles if they all get crammed into one nation? Well, Bushiroad has already kind of confirmed what would happen, so yeah. Rather than having a bunch of clans in one nation that you can't mix or match with, we will instead see several sub-clans within these nations that will work a bit like how clans used to back in the day. For those of you who don't know, a sub-clan is an archetype of cards within a clan that have their own unique playstyle and clearly want you to play them a certain way. A good example of this is Starvader versus Deleter. Both of these decks are in the Link Joker clan, but they're very clearly different and they play differently and attempt to win in different ways. So let's take Brantgate for example. We will get 3 or more different archetypes of cards within the nation, one taking inspiration from Nova Grappler, one taking inspiration from Dimension Police, and one taking inspiration from My Babies. For additional proof, look no further than the 5th trial deck for D era coming out, and this promotional image. This promotional image very clearly fit the aesthetics of the Link Joker clan, which, you know, would be a fit into Brantgate. But the theme of the trial deck is Hot Space Police Girls. Clearly, these two are meant to be different archetypes within the Brantgate nation. Booster Set 1 has already declared that there will be 2 different deck types available to build immediately from the first booster set. So, yeah. For some reason, people think that a nation has to have one playstyle and one theme like the clans used to. Not only is this mindset very close-minded, but this is simply not going to be the case, and in all honesty, I'm very glad for that. I think forcing people to play their archetypes pure is boring and it stifles creativity, and the fact that people defend the clan system saying it kept these archetypes in check boggles my mind. I've heard the argument that restrictions breed creativity, but the issue is that the way the clan system works and how often they have to release cards, the card pool simply isn't big enough from V-Series for us to make those kind of decisions in a creative and interesting manner. But enough about the card design implications, let's get to the good stuff. In the Yu-Gi-Oh! Trading card game, there existed a deck called Dragon Link. This was a deck that, after the 2020 ban list that banned Block Dragon, became the best deck in the format and usually ended on 2 disruptions and a floodgate. Now, playing the deck wasn't necessarily the fun part, although I believe that the deck was incredibly fun to play, but the fun part of the deck was building it. I remember very vividly sitting down with Robbie Cole and talking about Dragon Link theory for a few hours with him and his friends, and it made me realize why people still like the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! The deck building for that game is something that the fans love, and the process of making a well-oiled machine out of parts that seemingly don't go together is pure ecstasy. Dragon Link itself had so many ways you could build it, and all of them did the same thing, sure, but they all had different ways of doing it. You had the Rose Dragon combo, you had the debate on Saryuya, you had the massive pool of starters and extenders to consider, and all of this was possible because of the way that Yu-Gi-Oh! Is structured. The game is very open-ended, and in my opinion, is the game that, with the right format, is the best game to deck build for. Now, let's compare this to V-Series Vanguard. Due to how all the clans are just one playstyle and one build, building decks in V-Series was about as difficult as getting an erection, except one of those things is hard. Every deck was the same cookie-cutter build because there wasn't any room to explore and create new strategies. Bushiroad spoon-fed the players their decks, and it resulted in rather boring and predictable gameplay. I shouldn't be able to ask 10 people for a deck list and get the same build 10 times, because then you know that something has gone horribly wrong. Now, it is possible to take this idea of exploration a little too far. Yu-Gi-Oh! Has an issue where every extra deck is starting to kinda look the same, and the monsters in said extra deck are totally generic with no reason to play them in their assigned archetypes. This is why the nation system is absolutely perfect. It allows Bushiroad to print cards in a vacuum while also having enough space to allow exploration within those vacuums. If done correctly, this could legitimately be one of the best eras Vanguard has ever had in deck building history. The reason why G is heralded as one of the best deck building eras of the game is because that you had so many complex decisions that you had to make within your clan's card pool due to the sheer amount of good choices your clan had. In this case, restrictions did breed creativity because there were so many cards you could still choose from. There were legitimate discussions on what card was good, similar to discussions on the Dragon Link deck. For example, back before the TikTok ban during G, there were legitimate rage debates on how to properly execute the time leap kill and what ratios were proper for the deck. Luard, before set 12, had arguments as to what ratios of grade 1s to run and how to properly build the deck. And let's talk about this fucking thing and how he had so many variants and each variant had no idea what the best deck list was due to the amount of defensive options. In V-Series, you basically took together your double rares, triple rares, and VRs and slapped them together. And don't you worry, I'm getting to VRs in a hot minute. But pretty much all the deck lists in V were cookie cutter, and there wasn't really much variance other than the decks like Luard and Altmile. Other than that, deck building was very much solved. In D-Series, we're going to start seeing decks that blur the lines of their archetype, toying with other pieces from other decks, and we might start seeing debates again regarding which version of the deck is optimal. No, I don't count debates from the V-Series, because in my experience, those debates basically come down to, do I run Gavrail in my Gavrail deck? But that's only regarding Standard. What about Premium? Well, in the Premium format, we've seen nation support before in the form of the Zeroth Dragons and the Progenitor Dragons, cards that can be used in any clan that belongs to that nation. So nation support isn't exactly new to the format. However, mass main deck amounts of support is new to the format. Just imagine the kind of new choices we'll be bringing to the format. Imagine the deck building decisions that this is going to create. Imagine the new and crazy builds. We could see one deck have a combo or an engine from Dragon Empire in one clan like Tchaikovsky, and another deck doing the same thing, but in Narukami or Kagero, which separates it and makes it different, and oh my gosh, I'm so ready! This means that every set will shake up the format and bring us new toys. Gone are the days of some decks getting updated and others left to rot. Now are the days of constant, consistent change. Premium will now always become a format that is never stale and growing in the context of the card pool, which will keep us busy and preoccupied, preventing the burnout that V-Series brought. D-Series is, depending on the card design team not being a bunch of clowns, bring us back to the glory days of G, where solving a deck list actually felt satisfying and not like solving one of those super easy puzzles on the back of your 40 Prevel cereal box. Also, off script, real quick, I'd just like to mention that Stoica, or however the heck you pronounce it, Stoica has Great Nature, Neo Nectar, Mega Colony, Grand Blue, and Aqua Force, all of which I would consider, except for maybe like Mega Colony because it's a control deck, but all the other four I consider to be some of the most toolboxy and like interesting decks in the game. And the fact that you're gonna get cards that like are made for Great Nature style decks in Stoica, but then you can play them in Grand Blue or like Aqua Force, like the amount of utility that Grand Blue is about to get is actually phenomenal. And if I were you, I would purchase your staples from V-Series now. Let me paint a hypothetical situation for you. This is your opening hand. What do? Well, you obviously mulligan, right? So let's draw a new hand. How about this hand? Well, you gotta play with this now. Here's your draw for turn. So what do? G-assist? Well, you're going first, so I hope you enjoy going -1 and giving your opponent a free card. These are obviously mathematically very unlikely chances, but imagine if it's the last game of the finals, and this is the game that could get you your free Worlds invite. And then this shit happens. It feels bad, doesn't it? Wouldn't you rather it be your fault that you lost instead of game mechanics fucking you over? Well, there is a solution. Yes, I'm of course referring to the ride deck. This mechanic is something we should have had from the beginning, and in all honesty, I'm so glad it exists. It reduces RNG variance in a game, which is always a good thing. Players don't like losing because of bad RNG, so making sure the game does that less is always welcome. I will say there are some small implications that some people may not have considered, and I am of course talking about deck building again, because this is a trading card game, and deck building is, in most of the time, the most interesting part of those. The ratios of the cards in your deck usually had one thing dictating how many of each grade you had, and that is of course the topic of ride consistency, adjusting your numbers so that you ensure that you ride from 0 to 3 flawlessly every time. Because of that, decks like Altmile, which adore having grade 2s, have to flood their deck with 1s and 4 copies of Altmile instead of playing more 2s. You had to dedicate a huge section of your deck to this to solve the issue of bricking. Ratios were pretty cut and dry as a result, but I think we're going to start seeing some absolutely psychotic ratios, such as 1 grade 3 or 1 grade 2, both of which would be slapped in the ride deck. This makes for more interesting choices. Do you want to be more defensive? Well, you can fill your decks with 1s and cut down on the 2s and 3s, and your ride deck will do that for you. This is of course assuming that the 1s will maintain the 10k shield, which it doesn't seem like it. God dang it! Do you want to push for more damage? No problem. Build your deck that way and use the ride deck to solve your riding issue. I don't think anyone has anything against this change. Ensuring that you always have your ride is something that everyone can get behind, and everyone likes more varied deck building. However, it is such a good mechanic that people are begging for it to be in V Standard and Premium, which is a really bad idea. Not only do I want V to rot in hell, and I refuse to accept anything that would make it more fair and interesting, but Premium is a minefield of cards that would be broken if this mechanic was a thing. You know what? No, I actually need to talk about this for a second, because people keep saying we could implement the ride deck into Premium if we implemented a huge ban list. Going off script for a second, that is absolutely crazy. First of all, let's pretend they actually banned the problem cards like Zazan and Bowman. That doesn't even begin to cover all the cards that actually have really good ride effects like Berserk Dragon and the such. Do I even need to mention a card like Rhodia? Do you really want to give DI Rhodia every game? So then what's the solution? Do we just ban every card that has a good on-ride effect? Do we just reach a point where we have to ban Giraffa out of principle? Because I would find that absolutely hysterical. Remember during V when they announced the new stride rules that brought up a bunch of toxic interactions? Like, changing your core rules when your card pool was designed for the original core rules is a really bad idea. The only way to make the ride deck work is if they reset the card pool, which they did, so they have the chance to do so. In the Yu-Gi-Oh! Trading card game, back when they released Link Summoning and changed the game to Master Rule 4, it was a fundamentally broken mechanic, and still is, that ended on putting too many innocent cards that were fine on the ban list, just because they're really good with Link Summoning and Master Rule 4. This is just a rule of design. If your card pool was made for a certain set of rules, do not change those and bend the rules even if they're flawed. Use card design to solve those problems because you're asking for more problems. I also saw someone say that they could just make it so that you could only use the ride deck every other turn, which is kind of weird. It just adds unnecessary complication to a format that already has a really bad entry point for new players, so it would just be slapping a band-aid on a knife wound. These downsides are really not worth the fix to a mathematically unlikely problem. The ride deck is a welcome addition to the new format, but it just can't exist in Premium and V. However, there is a reason why you'd want to play more than one of your boss monster in your deck, and that is... When I saw this icon on the cover card for the new boss monster of the Dragon Empire deck, I had a heart palpitation. I thought gifts were back, and thank the heavens that is not the case. What we got, however, is arguably more boring than gifts. Persona Ride is not a series of cool effects that you get when you ride a copy on top of your current Vanguard, and as far as we know, the front row buff and draw are the only things that this mechanic does. I really would have preferred this to be like a break ride situation, where every card that does a Persona Ride has a different cool effect that you could pull off, which is unfortunately just not the case. However, since the rest of the reboot has been absolutely spectacular, I have some speculations for what this could possibly mean. I believe that Persona Ride is the mechanic for Dragon Empire. I think that each nation is going to get a different mechanic to separate them as decks, and how this will work, I have no idea, but I think either every nation will get a separate Persona Ride gimmick or a separate gimmick altogether, and I believe this because the overtrigger effects are different depending on the nation, so for this mechanic to be universal seems a little bit weird, if that makes sense. It doesn't seem right to make the overtrigger so varied and have the series' main mechanic be so boring. I will say, I also think this is the case because if you remember, Dragon Empire is the clan nation, I believe off the top of my head, that has the most Excel decks, which means that obviously the front row buff is very reminiscent of front triggers, which were Excel deck exclusives. So once again, I really don't think that this Persona Ride thing is a universal type of effect, and maybe is just kind of for this nation. And even if it is just this boring one-of effect that every nation gets, I don't think it would be correct to assume it will stay that way. way. Given that the rest of the reveals here are great and the only things I have issues with are the overtrigger and the free format change, I think that the clan selection having a bunch of interesting and fun cards with a boring mechanic is, I'm allowed to wait and see what happens before I make any solid opinions. In conclusion, it's still far too early to talk about anything involving this mechanic, so this is as far as we can go for now. Okay, so who here remembers GRs? Remember when they were mandatory 4-of that you had to play on your respective deck? Yeah, no one liked that. It wasn't until later when we got GRs that weren't a 4-of staple that people were completely fine with them. Later sets in G, like 12, 13, and 14, all had GRs that you didn't need a playset of. Shiranui, Mukuro, and Alexandros were 2-ofs at least. Alexandros was a 3-of a lot of the time, but nobody in their right mind played Altmile, so Fetus didn't matter either. And Dragstarter Luard and Chronovisor Heritage were both 1-ofs. The only one I consider to be a staple would be the Purge, and even then, that was a 3-of at most. Even if you got a GR from 10 sets ago, 90% of the time, due to the way that the G-Zone worked, you could still get some uses out of those GRs. For example, Chrono Dragon Next Stage still saw play in ZTB during the last era of G, and Wailing Thavas was still played in the last few decks Aquaforce had in the era. So Bushiroad decided to take everything about VRs and make it suck. VRs were mandatory 4-of staples for your clan that got replaced the next time your clan got support. They lost value almost immediately and were also unplayable about a month after they would be released. So seeing that they finally decided to just axe them makes me a very happy boy. This means that the highest rarity you can get is RRR, and those were a lot more accessible to the players than VRs were. This, of course, like the other good things on this reboot, was met with skepticism. How will Bushiroad make money? How will they sell product if they're essentially giving cards away in $5 themed, oh my god, $5 trial decks? This is real! Well, buddy, let me tell you. Bushiroad has announced that they're doing 1 SP per box, and that foil versions of both commons and rares are a thing. If there's one thing that Commander in Magic taught me, it's that there's value in printing premium versions of easy-to-get cards in the same set as said cards, and people are more than willing to pay the top dollar to pimp out their pet decks, no matter the card game. So this choice ensures that people will be purchasing the product even if all the main chase cards have a lower rarity option. In other words, rather than making the staple cards the selling point, they've made the high rarity versions of the said staple cards the selling point, giving casual players in budget decks the ability to still play the game they love without removing one of their kidneys and bankrupting themselves in the process. I still don't get to this day why people think that good cards have to be impossible to get for new players. Like, Lightning Storm in Yu-Gi-Oh! Is a required 3-of staple in the side deck and is like $100 right now. Required cards should not be 1 or 2 per box, and yes, I do think secret rares in Yu-Gi-Ohs are a bad idea. Just bring back ultimate rares and sell your cards that way, Konami. You would be printing money. Overall, making the game more accessible for newer players is a more than welcome change, and I'm glad they did it. It's taking us back to simpler times when, your required 4-ofs weren't impossible to acquire. Back in 2018, the G-Series finally came to an end with the last set of the era, and I sighed a sigh of sadness, but I was excited to see where the game would go. I remember being in high school when G was first announced and being extremely excited for the announcement of the new era of the game, so I was really hyped to see what happened next. Then I woke up one morning to find out that it was a reboot to the classic era, and I was a little let down, but optimistic. Imagine all the cool things they can do for premium. New Blaster Blade and new Overlord for their respective decks, that's awesome! But at the end of the day, it was just a cash grab. Rehashing a bunch of new units to get your money, and there was nothing new here, not even to the core rules. It was just the same game again. They clearly didn't care about the game design later on, and this was literally, hey, do you guys remember Kai and Aichi? You remember Kai and Aichi, right? I mean, seriously, you guys don't remember Kai and Aichi, do you? Look at Blaster Blade and Overlord. You're bio stuff anyway, so who cares? Look at Kai and Aichi, guys. This is a stupid marketing gimmick. Kai and Aichi, Kai and Aichi, Kai and Aichi, Kai. There wasn't anything new or interesting other than the gift mechanic, and we all know how I feel about that. But this isn't a video about my hatred of V. This is about how Overdress is different than V, even though it is just another reboot. But calling that would be a huge disservice to the many things I've talked about in the video so far. None of the changes I've been talking about were in the first reboot. None. It was just that, a reboot. But this time, I feel like resetting the card pool is totally justified. The nation system, the ride deck, the change to rarities, the new set structure, all of these are changes that the first reboot didn't have, which makes this second reboot feel like an entirely different game. If you're going to do a reboot, this is how you do it. You change the structure of the game because you have the luxury to do so, and you have a new card pool. That means you have design space that you can explore and mess around that other card games just don't. The ride deck and the nation system are changes that could have only been implemented with a resetting to the card pool. So to say that this is just just another reboot is a massive lie. Not only that, but it legitimately seems like they're going to be learning from their mistakes this time around, rather than just making them worse. V didn't fix any of the issues G had, it only made them even more problematic, and the high prices, the bad card design, the power creep, and the shafting of certain clans was only the beginning. Overdress is learning from the mistakes of late G and all of V. Once the first booster drops, every nation will be on the same level in terms of support, unlike V, where it took us about a year to reach that level, and even then, some clans got more than others at that point. No, all the nations won't necessarily be the same power level, but they'll have the same number of cards to play with, and that's all that really matters. The rarity changes are a clear sign of them learning, and the ride deck is an acknowledgement to a flawed game mechanic in the game itself. They also did say straight up that they'd be listening to the players more often. That, in my opinion, is a fantastic sign of things to come, because back in V series, they clearly didn't give a shit about what we wanted or what we thought, and I even did an entire video about that, hashtag shameless plug. Overall, this clearly isn't the same as last time, and like every other negative opinion I've heard about Overdress so far, anyone who says that is just another reboot is, clearly lacking a critical amount of thinking skills. Okay, let's get this out of the way. The Overtrigger. No, I don't like it. It's a super sacky mechanic that seriously should not have been created. It's a one of I win button that you can't choose to activate. Like, if it was a card that like sat in your hand and you had to, activate it or do something with it, it'd be kind of fine, but still a little problematic. But like, this is a trigger. You have to top deck it, and like, it has 50k shield, which is cool, but like, in order to get the most value out of it, you have to trigger check it, and like, I do not like it, Sam I Am, and it's only because you can only play one of that I don't like it specifically. That'd be consistent. Like, I preferred Soul Charge at 3 rather than 1. Like, if it's at 3, I'm at least losing to the broken card consistently, and if it's at 1, it just feels worse. Like, they only won because they got 1 out of 40 cards. Like, I'm sure the Overtrigger will have cards designed around its existence and will be fine-tuned using the card pool, and let's be real, it's probably fine in Premium. There aren't many cards that can take advantage of a card like this, and I can't even think of a relevant one off the top of my head. Oh well, we'll see in due time. In conclusion, this is a very, very welcome addition to the game that I feel like is a breath of fresh air after 3 years of rechanges, rehashes, and uninspired card design. I cannot wait to see what Bushiroad has in store for us, and right now, my trust in the company has been restored for the time being. Keep in mind that this is all without the card pool in context, and as of right now, we have almost no cards to look at, so I can really only speculate. There is, of course, the chance that they fuck up, and if they do, I'll have to make another video with a clickbait title and a poorly made thumbnail to get attention from my barely functional YouTube channel. Opinions can change, and I seriously hope I don't have to change mine. Godspeed, Bushiroad, and I await whatever surprises you have in store for me. If you're still watching this video, then you are a statistical anomaly, and I seriously thank you from the bottom of my heart with every inch of my being. I want to express my gratitude for staying this long. If you want to help support me in making more long videos like this one, then I ask that you like the video, subscribe perhaps if it fancies you, turn on notifications so you can see when I upload in the next month, and if you want to go the extra mile, you can consider supporting me on Patreon, and even $1 is enough to make my life a little bit easier. And if everyone watching this video did just that, then I'd be able to start making video for you guys on a more consistent basis. Regardless, just watching the video is enough for me, and I cannot thank you enough. I'm Premium Chad of Team Galaxy Brain, and I hope you have a fantastic rest of your week. Hey there, so you're still watching the video for some reason. Hi, how are you? I'm going to be doing a new segment now where I'm just going to be talking to you, the viewer, and kind of letting you know the haps, as the cool kids call it, of what's going on behind the production of these videos. Obviously, if you really don't care or you don't want to hear any of this, you can obviously just click off the video now. I put it at the end of the video for a reason. You've already seen the content you've come here to see, so if you're still sticking around to hear me talk, thank you. You're amazing. I kind of just wanted to, well, first of all, I wanted to apologize for the extreme length that this video took. School has started, and this video took a lot longer to edit than I thought it would. I tried taking an easier approach. I'm like, okay, maybe this will be easier to edit because it'll take a little less time because, Overdress news is already out, so this video should be out as soon as humanly possible, so I attempted to cut a few corners, but what ended up happening was, I was like, oh wait, no, I can do this, and then it ended up being a lot longer to edit than one of my usual videos, but I had the most fun making these, this sort of video where, like, you have the pop-on images instead of the slow fade into. I'll probably be doing that a bit more often. I do have a few video ideas, but those might take time because Obviously, life comes first. I work Uber Eats, so I gotta get money that way. School starts, so I apologize for the frequency in which these videos come out, but obviously, you know, life comes first. So yeah, also I wanted to apologize for, in this video, there might have been a bit of misinformation. So for example, the fact that I thought the persona rides would be different depending on the clan, or they'd have different nations, sorry, or they'd be different depending on they have a different mechanic per nation, and that's just not the case. We got the promotional images for the starter deck cards, and there is a persona ride card there. So I was wrong, and I apologize. You'll still be seeing that in the video, but just so much to edit, dude. I can't be bothered to re-record the audio. This video is already late enough as is. So rather, I'm apologizing at the end of the video. But yeah, I just wanted to say thank you for watching. You're amazing. A lot of you really wanted to see this video after seeing my last video and how I went, oh, Vanguard sucks, blah, 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 blah. I really do think that this is going to change the game. I really do think this is going to make the game infinitely better. I really do think that this is the change that should have been implemented, like, once V-Series started. Like, this should have been the thing. But whether V-Series was a waste of a 10th anniversary idea, like, you know, hey, it's the 10th anniversary, we're going to bring all these units back. Whether that's a waste, that's a completely different video. That's a discussion that's far, 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 far too long. And I've pretty much ranted on long enough. So yeah, you're amazing. If you want to help these videos come out more frequently, I do have a Patreon. If everyone watching this video donated $1, then that'd probably be enough for me to take at least 1 week off of work, to work on these videos for you guys. I can easily edit these in a week. And yeah, you guys are absolutely amazing. Come here. Give me a hug. Everyone give me a hug. If you're watching, give me a hug. Give me a hug. All right. You're awesome. Thanks a lot. Be good people. Stay safe. I'm really bad at saying like bye or like, closing out a video. So, here's a stuffed duck puppet. Bye.